Florida seceded from the Union January 10th, 1861. She was the third state to do so. In fact, the folks from Washington City called Florida the smallest tadpole in the dirty pool of secession. The Florida militia showed up 7 days early to the garrison there at St. Augustine of Fort Marion. The local militia captain banged on the door and ordered the fort to surrender, or they would storm it. Fortunately for the volunteers, there was nobody home except one sergeant, Ordnance Sergeant Douglas. He was regular Army, as regular armies could be, and he said, "Listen here, fellas, instead of having violence and bloodshed, if you will check my inventory and sign a receipt for the fort, I will give you the keys." But you notice he had to have that paperwork done first before he surrendered the fort. The Florida militia was so thrilled they actually passed the hat, took up a collection for him and his wife, first-class ticket steamboat from Jacksonville, Florida to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At that point, volunteers from the Marion Light Artillery from Fernandina came into the fort. They occupied it for a short time, taking a lot of the heavy guns out and moving them up to Fort Clinch, where they were emplaced in sand batteries to protect Fernandina Beach. The garrison was occupied roughly 15 months by the Confederate Army. You had units like the 2nd Florida Company H were mustered into Confederate service there in the courtyard, and also a local unit, Company B, the St. Augustine Independent Blues. The 3rd Florida Infantry was mustered into service. Both these units, coming from the St. Augustine area, would see horrific casualties during the war. The mayor of St. Augustine surrendered the town after the Confederates had evacuated the fort, because Confederates decided the fort was not worth anything. St. Augustine was going to be a backwater of the war, and they pulled out. It wasn't worth fighting for. In fact, a little-known general at this time, named Robert E. Lee, ordered the evacuation of a lot of the coastal fortifications. When the Confederates left, the Union Navy came in the next day, occupied the fort. And then you'd find a line of regiments from New England would come in. During the war, the elements of the 33rd United States Colored Troops, a regiment of the Union Army, recruited some of the local blacks here to serve in their ranks, where they accomplished a great deal and gained a reputation for being a solid, well-disciplined regiment. The Union soldiers enjoyed the garrison life. They socialized with the people. A lot of them got along with a lot of hidden loyalists who were still in the city of St. Augustine. 2 years later on, afraid of Confederate activity, the commander of Fort Marion issued an order that all folks who had family in the Confederate Army must leave the environs of St. Augustine or swear allegiance to the Union. A large majority of the folks decided to leave. They would not betray their relatives, and they left. And they were escorted outside the city limits of St. Augustine into other places in Florida. The fort stayed in Union hands for the rest of the war, and it passed a pretty quiet time. In 1865, the war basically ended with the surrender of Robert E. Lee at Appomattox, Virginia. Florida would enter the really rough stage of Reconstruction back into the Union.